question for Shruti ma'am, and this is asked by one of our participants. I have written consulting as my post-MBA career goal. So will I definitely be asked a guesstimate / market sizing question for the interview?
Great. Okay. So let's just go back to the basics. Why, would anyone ask you a guesstimate or market sizing question, right? Not just for consulting in general, or why would, so the panelists want to understand your thought process, the approach that you take. One of the ways of doing that is a guesstimate question or a market sizing question, because as a consultant, so I've been a consultant for almost now a decade. Now, as a consultant, you're working, you're sector agnostic, at least in the initial years, right? So you don't know whether you're going to be working in education, healthcare, infrastructure. When you go and you're assigned projects, you're supposed to do, you're supposed to plan out go-to-market strategies, do market sizing, identify, do competitor analysis and all that stuff. Market sizing or estimating what the value of that market is going to be, how that market is going to grow, is very, very fundamental to your assignment or to your consulting project, right? So like I said, one of the ways, and which is why it's very, very popular, because it's perhaps one of the easiest ways to understand what the approach is. So when I say approach, they want to try and see what are the assumptions you're making. No one really knows, whether the market size for aeroplanes in the next 10 years is going to be 5 billion, 10 billion, or 100 billion. They just want to understand, are you making sound assumptions? How are you reaching that 4 billion, 10 billion, 100 billion number, right? What are, what is the process, or what are the number of steps you're taking, whether you're structured in your thought process. Because if you are structured, if you're making sound assumptions, then when you go, when you're in ISB and you're participating in group discussions, you're going to bring that side of your personality, or bring that side of your, thought process forward. So they want to see if you're able to do that, because when you're in ISB, you will have a lot of case studies to do. You will have a lot of, unseen scenarios that you need to work in. So if you can't make sound assumptions, if you don't have a structured thought process, you're not really bringing anything to the table. So guess estimate questions, are one category of questions you may or may not be asked. But that, having said that, you should definitely prepare for guess estimate questions. So try and do like different scenarios. Just, you can either practice it with your friends, or practice it with like people at home, or even on your own. Like, just take random sort of situations, and you can, like, I know someone was asked how many I think chairs can you fit in an aeroplane, like, or like weird questions like that. So just try and prepare so that you get into that habit of, just that, like, okay, clarifying what the assumptions are, writing down your steps, explaining how you need to do it. That's it. So just practice as many guess estimate questions as you can. But it doesn't mean because you've said consulting, they will ask you. There are other ways also where they can evaluate whether you're fit, whether you have a structured thought process or not. I don't know if Arijit or Umang, if you guys want to add something more on this.
I think you've covered it mostly. And in my, I didn't get a guesstimate. But generally, what I've heard is people with lesser years of work experience get guesstimates. And if you've had a significantly long work experience, generally guesstimates are not asked. And even if they're asked, they are essentially, as Shruti said, they are being evaluated for your structured thinking. So the end answer would not matter. It's just structure that is what they're trying to evaluate. So yes.
Yeah, and I guess if you say you've been in consulting, if you want to get into consulting, you might not get. If you say you're already in consulting, and if you've done a lot of go-to-market projects, or if you've done some marketing strategy projects, like if you say that anywhere in your essays, in your CV, in your application form, then the question is, again, how did you do that? It's probably not a guess estimate. It's probably like, how did you approach the problem statement? What sort of, because as in consulting, you a lot of times there are problem statements that are abstract. And again, you have to have a structured thinking to get to an answer, because there's no right or wrong answer. I mean, if there was a right answer, people would not pay millions of dollars to consultants every year to advise them if they had already known the answer, right? So there is no right or wrong answer. Consultants come in, have a structured thinking, and tell you something which is potentially a right answer based on certain logic. So same thing here in the interview, you're able to present that logic and answer a question. Nobody knows how many people, like probably the question that might ask is how many people will turn up in the Qatar World Cup 2022. Football fan, you might get a question like this. Any people in the house who are football fans, they might ask you a question like this: the Qatar World Cup 2022 in December, how many will turn up? So nobody knows if there is a force major event like COVID. Potentially, they might not allow anyone from outside the country to come in even and enjoy the match. It can be a closed door event. So who knows that? But if these, so you have to, while answering these questions, you have to make certain assumptions, and you have to lay down those assumptions very clearly to the person who's asking these questions, so that he or she knows that your answer is based on these assumptions. And if these assumptions do not hold true, then probably your answer should not be evaluated on that light. But yes, if these assumptions hold true, then is your answer good or bad, wrong or right or wrong, right? So again, so you have to be very sure about the assumptions you're making. Just don't, like, even if you know the number, right? For example, if the question is how many people attended the Tokyo Olympics, right? So if you know the answer, probably somebody is somebody follows newspapers, has been following the Olympics, and he knows what is the answer. Don't just say the answer. You know the answer, but you backtrack and reverse engineer and tell you how you got to that answer, again with assumptions, right? So yeah, so that's about guess estimates and market sizing. But every now and then, people from consulting who have been in consulting in the past are asked these questions. Yes, people might with lower experience are more prone to asking these questions, but even if you have higher experience, don't think that you might not get these questions.